Okay, Chris, could you continue, please? Chris Allen, you're on. So we're on rail, Chris. Okay, so taking questions on the rail paper. Okay, Rob, you're on.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. I just take the comment earlier on this morning, Chris, that you mentioned that we had limited time to put together this deal, and it always worries me that if we're under pressure, that we perhaps haven't considered during our due diligence period other options. And I just wonder if we have done that in the sense of, have we considered joint ownership of the land with Waikato, given that you've got this, with Waikato District Council, given that you've got this discussion and alliance going around the rail, and given that presumably a number of their residents will come down and park and ride if it's in this particular location.
So we haven't given consideration to being a joint owner of the property with Waikato District Council, and I think that would be extremely unlikely because this is in our jurisdiction. So Waikato District Council would have a number of issues to consider on rail stops within their own jurisdiction in terms of infrastructure and their own park and rides. So
are they doing anything themselves? Because it might be better off for us to go and use theirs. You know, if they're going to put a park and ride at Ngaruahi, then we could all go up there and park rather than invest in it ourselves. In Hamilton, I'm just, you know, I mean, $6.5 million just seems a huge amount of money to kind of land bank in anticipation of something happening when it's going to be of benefit to the region, and we're the sole purchaser of it.
Yeah, so look, the only discussions I've heard about from Waikato are potential park and ride at Mercer, so I know they've been looking at that. Look, I do make the point that we believe this is a park and ride for the public transport hub there, so broader than just the rail stop. So the hub that's proposed on Tasman Road would be a future bus and rail facility as well.
Okay, okay. And have we thought of have we thought of Claudelands, as given that we own land over there, that Claudelands might also be a park and ride and might be an alternative to this piece of land?
Probably not as an alternative, but some of our future rail thinking has been some sort of facility over in the Claudelands area where we do own some land already. So I do make the point too that the location of this public transport facility is a matter of the district plan. So there was quite a long debate when the district plan was sorted out about where the PT facility should be. Not specifically the park and ride to go with that, but the location of this facility has been through a district plan process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And final question is, if we went ahead with the purchase and we were successful in getting the NZTA subsidy, and you mentioned earlier in your presentation that there was a possibility that if we decided not to put the park and ride there, we would have to we could sell the land. Do we pay the subsidy back at the stage if we decided to on-sell the land for some other use?
Clearly, I think we would be obligated to do that if that situation arose. Okay. So that, yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just to be very clear, this is only a commuter service we're talking about here, isn't it?
In terms of the rail you're talking about?
Yeah.
Or?
So there's a park and ride thing. I assume that's going to be really close to the railway, and we're not talking about, and I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but the infrastructure to unload lorries and trucks and put it onto trains. We're talking about simply providing for I assume there'll be a sealed car park, might be a cafe there, might be some public toilets, but that's what we're talking about, is that right?
That's correct. It's not a freight marshalling yards or anything like that. It's purely a passenger transport stop. So just to remind councillors, it was a matter of discussion through the district plan, as I said, in engagement with the TGH and the base at that time. So we do have an agreement with TGH about the site, and TGH would be building an overbridge over the railway line to connect this to the base. Yep. So it was all based around people and passenger transport, and definitely not freight.
So that's it. Okay, that's cool. Thank you. Just want clarity on that. We've tried this before, haven't we? Sorry, when I say we've tried this, we have tried commuter rail from Hamilton to Auckland before, and it's simply failed for the lack of demand. I think I'm right in saying that.
Yeah, I think you're referring to some early trials, sort of going back many years now. So that's part of the strategic business case considerations that the working group's putting together to, at this point in time, looking at their past experience, looking at what's changed since then. So it was a long time ago, lots of things have changed, not the least probably been emerging central government policy around this as well.
So can you just expand a little bit on what has changed? I know you haven't got the business case in front of you.
No, I think I can say this because it's part of the working group, and it's about you know, the increased congestion on the Auckland motorway, and particularly trip reliability. So that's one of the factors they're looking at, is the reliability of a passenger transport service into Auckland rather than a road base into Auckland.
By that you mean if you drive your car up to Auckland, you may or may not be stopped for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whereas the train, unless someone's chopped a tree down or something like that, the rail will be clear. Yep.
Correct. That's what I mean by reliability. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Now, just to be very clear, also, this is a $9.6 million project in total. The land purchase is 6.1 million. Then in the road to carry park and ride, there's 500,000, beg your pardon, 2019, 2020. Then another 3 million, 2020-21.
Yeah, so just to be clear, councillors, that is correct. So the matter before us today is the protecting the opportunity to put in a passenger park and ride system here. So that is in year one, so we're obligated to buy the land in year one. We've put provision in year 3, I think, about $3 million for developing a park and ride. So that would give time for the strategic business case to develop, to be developed, and know exactly when rail was likely to be implemented.
Okay. So at the moment and I've figured I think we've spent $3,000 to get the option, and that option expires sometime, doesn't it?
Yes, as stated in the paper, we have to decide by the 12th of December whether we want to make the agreement unconditional. Okay. Presumably, you could renegotiate to extend that. I know whoever's got the $3,000 might want some more certainty. It's, in my opinion, very unlikely. There's quite a high demand for this bit of land we're talking about.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. If we buy the land, we're buying land before we've got a watertight business case. You're saying your advice is that land out there is valuable, and it's unlikely that we'll lose value on the land. Is that part of the argument? So even if we decide not to go ahead with it, we're buying a bit of land that probably won't lose value and things like that. That's correct, and that was the subject of the previous paper to council, and
I was just looking, one of the resolutions of council was, and I've put that on, it's on page 6, so this is the resolution that has already been passed by council, was request the chief executive to report back to council prior to October 2018 on options to on-sell the land purchase under this decision if funding has not been confirmed in the 2018 10-year plan. So that was to recognise that councillors are putting together a draft plan today that's still got to go through public consultation and won't be finalised to July. So we have to buy the property, but it was the body of the previous report indicated that council could choose to on-sell the land, and there was some paragraphs in there that indicated we thought the value of the land would be retained.
Okay. So the holding cost for us would be the interest for the interest until such time as you make a decision, yay or nay, with regard to a business case. Be interest. I presume this land currently pays rates, does it?
That's correct. So the previous report had that information in there. It had the rates impact in the previous
Neither of us
report.
can remember what that figure was, can we?
Yeah, I just can't recall.
It won't be a huge. Well, yeah. Okay. All right. No, thank you. Those are the questions I wanted.
Thank you, Chris. I just have one question. The bus, I don't know what it is out the base. Is it a bus transfer area, interchange or something? Are they? Is there any risk here for us? Are they? Do they have any plans to expand that service and that activity at the base?
We have been talking to in relation to this both regional council but also Kiwi Properties, who are now half owner on the base. They're looking at their site at the moment and have indicated to us that our proposals are compatible with their future development.
And will that mean, I know it's early days yet, but will that also mean that they would be open to talking about access, pedestrian access to and from the interchange to their facility?
Yep, so as I said before, we already have a signed agreement that the owners of the base would put the pedestrian overbridge over the railway line to connect the interchange to the base complex. Yeah. One of the other possibilities is that the bus transfer station might move from the base complex to the Tasman Road side of the railway line as well. So we still, but that's a possibility. Yeah, so that was going to be my next question as well, because it would be an advantage for them, obviously, to release some space on their property. So. And it might be an advantage to us as well to have a integrated public transport hub all together.
Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Being on the other side of the fence now, every time that purchase of infrastructure in the past has come up, it's been a submission formally made to regional council, because I know I've received it at the other end, to invest into this. Would we be able to make a submission asking regional council to consider in part funding? I mean, I know you say they don't fund land, but you can't actually have a regional railway station without land. So just wondering whether we would propose to work a little harder on regional council. It wouldn't be that they'd be surprised by that.
I would expect my Chair of Growth and Infrastructure to insist on that request, actually. So yes, I think we will pursue every opportunity.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chris. I know there's a lot of work gone on by you and your staff in a very short space of time for this. So with the park and ride, are we looking at, will there be a charging system for people to park their vehicles in?
Look, we certainly haven't done any work on that yet. So one of the big projects through the Access Hamilton Transport Improvement Projects is to do a mass transit plan. So that's one of the big gaps that we have in our transport strategy. So over the next year or two, we were anticipating working with regional council in particular and NZTA on a mass transit plan So part of that I seeing would be a more formalised strategy around park and rides and probably start to delve into some of those issues. But we haven't put any thought into whether it would be paid parking or not.
Okay. And presuming that's the case and you haven't gotten that deep with it, that New Zealand Rail, we're not sure whether the Overlander and the Northerner passenger service trains would be stopping there as well, that go north and south?
No, we haven't sort of, no. So we haven't had discussions about existing passenger rail service you're talking about, whether it would stop at the base. I would hope that would be logical, that if we did have a passenger transport stop there, that they would stop, but we certainly haven't had those discussions yet. So just to reiterate to Councillor, this is about protecting our opportunity for a park and ride. We're still in, initial stages of discussions about the rail service, and there's a long way to go on those discussions.
Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, from what I sort of just gathered, what I found out is there's quite a number of buses already going up to Auckland daily. I think about 20 or so from Hamilton or through Hamilton. Now, have we ever done some kind of research on how many people that are on the buses are commuting to Auckland, and whether that having that park and ride there would help them park there and then take the bus from there to go to Auckland? Because we might not be, because the train might be a long way off. It might be in the process, but it might be a long way off. So if there's some research done with buses.
The way I'd answer that is to say it will be part of the strategic business case that's been developed at the moment by all the partners. So the strategic business case by default is looking at connectivity between Hamilton and Auckland, and part of that consideration will be bus transport, and I think that would be a logical thing to include as part of that study.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Can the General Manager confirm that during the election campaign, the now Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made a major announcement in Tauranga, and as a result of that major announcement, one could expect very significant central government assistance and funding to give effect to the new government's public transport policies that relates to commuter rail between Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga?
I have heard some of the same statements that you've just recounted.
Thank you.
Was that a yes?
Yes, I've heard the same statements.
Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Just one quick question that I thought might have already been asked, but it hasn't. Just confirming, do you think there's a real risk that we won't get the 51% NZTA agency subsidy and be left with the full purchase price? I see that's covered in paragraph 38.
Yes, I do see that as a real risk under current policy, but as we've indicated in the report, and I put the attached letter, the Minister of Transport has signalled that he will be changing the government policy statement to be more favourable to public transport and rail. So it is a risk, and that's why we've included that.
So there's a bit of comfort around that letter then, although not a certainty, but a bit of comfort.
There's no certainty, but I guess around that letter and the statements of Councillor Gallagher, there's certainly some encouraging signs that council will be looking, that central government will be looking to invest in passenger rail.
That letter is not addressed to us, is it?
So that letter was a letter that was sent to all of the regional transport committees up and down the country to signal a change in government thinking on where they want to invest in transport. And they signal that through the document called the Government Policy Statement. So in that letter, he's indicated that with the time they've got, they will make minor amendments to reflect some of the things in there by December this year. but they will be looking to do a more substantive update of the GPS in 2018 to give effect to their transport policy.
So this is after our need to declare this unconditional, isn't it?
Absolutely, and probably after our decisions on the whole 10-year plan. It takes some time to move from government policy into NZTA investment criteria.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, we're in debates. Dave?
Clarification, that particular question of Rob's, the last part of it, we were given an indication at the Regional Transport Committee meeting on just last Monday that they expect the government policy, new government policy statement, the first bit of it included covering these points in the letter, to be ready for us April or May, just for the timing reason. So we may know before our final LTP.
Debate, Dave?
I didn't move it. You did it. You and Martin did.
I'm not speaking. I'm taking my...
All right, thanks.
You're in charge of the Transport Committee, so...
Well, not in charge. Chris is.
Well, you're the chair.
I just help him.
Oh. Growth and infrastructure.
And look, this is not about deciding on the rail service. I would like it to be, but we're not in that position yet. This is about deciding to keep our option open to have a rail stop in the north of the city. Quite a few years ago, when we started hearing the public push for that in the city, we did quite a bit of work, and there were professional studies done both by us and by the Regional Council that identified the need for a stop in the north of the city. And essentially, the surveys that were done showed that people were not keen on the idea, say from Rototuna or anywhere in the northern half of the city, going backwards to Frankton through difficult transport areas to go to the existing station. That was why one in the north was thought to be the sensible way out of that. Plus, the base itself was becoming a commercial nexus, and also an industrial nexus now. And our main bus route, the Orbiter, actually goes along Tasman Road. So it was thought there was a lot of chance for integration by having the stop there. So it was sort of like a fuzzy dot was put on that spot for future rail stop, so that with it in mind that it would integrate both with the base and with our existing bus transport system. And we've recently had spoken to the Regional Council bus people at a meeting about the need for them not to change their route for that, but to expand the hours of the service to accommodate any future rail one there, and they have done some initial planning on that. So it will be integrated if it happens. But none of that will be any use if we don't actually have the land available there to do this on. So the proposal is that we purchase this, that we actually don't pay the cash across for another 12 months, but that in the meantime, all the decisions about the rail service can be made by both us, the Regional Council and the other partners that we're talking with, plus the government in their first new government policy statement. So we're anticipating that before we have to pay across the cash, we will know whether this land is going to be needed, because we'll know whether a service is going to be started and when it's going to be started as well. So if things turn to custard and we have no rail service, we will need to clearly sell on the land. The information that we've had so far is it's unlikely to lose its value. Figures that came out yesterday showed nationwide there was a 6% increase in property values in the year to November 2017. There's some sign of some slowdown in Auckland, but not in the rest of the country and not in our area. So I think it's as safe a bet as you can ever have with land, especially given the shortage of commercial land. This was the last piece of commercial land abutting the rail line and Tasman Road in the back. So if we don't get that, there is no other land in that area to do it. We would have to shift substantially and certainly away from where the base is, and away from where the ring road goes around the city as well, because this is quite close to that. In terms of one of Rob's points about whether Waikato District should pay for it or pay a contribution, I think ideally they should, but they're actually putting in quite a bit of investment into stops in Huntly, perhaps Te Kowhata, perhaps Mercer, certainly Tuakau as well. So they are, and if you look at it, doing their share for infrastructure for any potential rail service, and they've actually got some of that money in their existing budgets. It's not an unfunded budget for them. So I think they're doing their share. As far as the regional council goes, we've already had discussions with them about contributing to the rail service, and I think Paula's point is perhaps not them contributing to the land, but if the service is going ahead, we'll still have to build a platform there, and that will be the ideal thing to hit them up about contributing to the cost of that. That would be my suggestion, but certainly we don't want to think that they would be contributing nothing, and they have said they're willing to receive a submission from us on that score in their LTP round that's coming over the next few months. So I think that's what we should do there. I guess just overall, one of the other things that's changed, not just a change in government policy since we last had a service, when the service stopped, we had a population of around 100,000. By the time a service would start, even if it was this time next year, our population's going to be over 170,000. So that's another big change, and a heck of a lot of that's in the north of the city. That'll do.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I am going to vote for the motion, although I am not entirely comfortable. This is absolutely, it's important. I absolutely 100% agree with the need to future-proof some land for rail into the future. The public have made it quite clear that they're supportive of developing a rail link to Auckland, and I think the time for that will come. However, I don't really like the timing and manner in which this deal was done. It was very rushed, came to us. We had an ultimatum, pretty much, around the timeline, and it got in ahead of the LTP and was literally dropped into the LTP, which makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I would have preferred to have it strategically driven through a conversation in the LTP so that we could investigate some of the questions that we raised in that very rushed workshop we had about it. So I asked questions at the time about location, whether Hamilton has to be the only place that a rail station might go. We have to be careful of putting too many rail stations on a line to Auckland, because then we lose the efficiency and effectiveness of that service. The more times it has to stop, the slower it is, etc. And that was shown up in the original strategic plan. Of course, that strategic case for rail is under review, and I am really keen to see it, and I would have preferred to have seen it and understood it before we were in this situation of having to do something quite quickly. So the timing is just really unhelpful in this respect. I think, for example, I disagree with Dave on the fact that the sub-region shouldn't necessarily contribute to land. Why not? You cannot have a rail service without a station, and it sits on the land, and their cars are going to park in the park and ride to use the rail. So Waikato District, for example, must be smiling if they think that we're going to put in all that lead infrastructure and they'll be able to benefit from it. So I think we do need to try a little bit harder, to be honest, and people from Waipa will come and use it, and people from Morrinsville will come and use it, and they'll park their car all day on that piece of land that we've bought to get up to Auckland. So let's see them have some skin in the game in respect to that, because it is an expensive start-up to this project. And yeah, so I'd really liked, if I had my way, and I'm not sure that it will be approved by Mayor King or Councillor Gallagher, I would like to have an additional recommendation that we do seek funding through the regional council towards, or through the sub-region, towards the purchase of this strategic site for rail. Because I did ask, you know, does it need to be in Te Rapa? Could it be 700 metres up the road towards Northgate? Could it be in the Waikato district? Could it be in Ngaruawahia? We've got Frankton as a station as well, which I consider a significant and important hub, because people will actually be able to bus or walk to that as well and get on the train. So I do have questions, but this is about getting stuff out. And well, this is actually the difficulty I have with this item. The LTP is about getting stuff out for the general public to comment on. This one will be done before that is finished, and that is uncomfortable for me. We'll have made the decision. without being able to give the public. I dare say that many people will be in favour of providing a rail hub. I get that, but it's all about transparency and proper process. But I am going to vote for it because of the underlying principle of reserving land for future rail.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I'm a little confused on Paula's points. I'm not sure how staff could have changed. I mean, this land became available, and we've been advised that we were concerned that it would not be available for long. So I think the staff have done a laudable job in briefing on us to get to this stage. I don't know if there's anything that they could have done over and above what they have done. So that's.
Sorry. Stop, Paula. I don't want an explanation. What's your point of order?
My point of order is that's incorrect inference on my position. I haven't criticised the staff, which is being inferred, and I haven't said anything other than I'm uncomfortable with the timing.
I don't think I said anything about criticism of
Gary,
staff.
move on with your debate, please.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this for a couple of reasons, and they were covered in the questions I've asked. We've been here before and we've done it, and it's failed. I would be very, very supportive if this was a freight solution. Don Braid, who's the managing director of Main Freight, which is one of the country's biggest, probably the biggest transport firm, has been very strong in his support of rail in terms of freight, and that's him supporting a competitor to himself. But I have grave doubts about the commuter side of things because we have tried it before and it hasn't worked. The problem with commuter services is that it's not point to point. You have to, as we've said, you have to drive somewhere, get out of your car, get onto a train, get into Auckland, and there's no way in the world that your train will stop outside the office or the shop you want to go to in Auckland. You've still got to find another transport mode to get to the meeting or the family or the restaurant or wherever you're going to. So that it has that weakness. I'm also less concerned, but there is a concern that we are buying land. We're effectively land banking without positive confirmation that we are going to use the product. So use the land. Now I know there are, and I'm a little bit aware of the land values out that area. So I think I agree that is a small risk that we'll be left holding something that we paid $6.4 million worth, and it's going to be worth less than that in a year's time. And I don't think that will happen. But I've always been counselled against council becoming a land banker. So it's not I think rail has its place. I think rail's place is primarily freight, and in some situations has value in commuting, but I still don't think that there's enough. I would be surprised if there's enough demand for the commuter service from here to Auckland, and I think we'll just end up in the same situation we did 7 or 8 years ago when we tried it last time. Thank you.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I support this. To me, it's not really that complicated. It hurts a little, but it's not that complicated. It's about planning ahead for our city, which is what we should be doing. It's not glamorous. There's no instant gratification here. But I think it's the right thing to do. In a perfect world, maybe we would have done it sometime earlier when land was a bit cheaper. I don't know, designated in the district plan or done something, but we're here now. That's all hindsight. We need this land and we need to act now, so we need to go ahead and do it. If you take it that the commuter rail link to Auckland is going to happen, which I do, and if you take it that we need a park and ride at the base, which I think you do, if it's going to be viable, then to me there's not really too much to talk about. We've got to do it. I think we're a forward-looking council, and I think we would be very remiss not to take this opportunity. I support it.
Deputy Mayor Marson.
This is one of those, there are debates and debates. This is actually a debate which is a moment in history. similar to debates that we had around the building of the very excellent bus terminal that we now have in the central city. With great respect to Councillor Southgate, I have to refute your criticisms. We have had massive discussions since I rejoined this council in 2010, and Chris Allen has 1, 2, 3 grey hairs which he's bleached out because I and other councillors have constantly hectored him. That massive discussion happened with the district plan. It went on to the discussions with the owners of the base who have now approved the overpass, so it relates in positioning, if you look at the map, to their public bus stop in the base itself. That massive discussions happened even with the previous Transport Minister, the Honourable Simon Bridges, in the Mayor's office. I was present, where even he was warming to the idea. In terms of the, and we, by resolution of the previous council, gave staff clear instruction by resolution to come back to this chamber with the options. And we were mindful, along with the previous Mayor Julie Hardacre and the previous council, that our options were starting to disappear. This is the last chance. This literally is the last chance saloon. This is the last bit of land, because the other options have been gobbled up. And so I'm actually really delighted that staff have finally come back, have done some really good work in terms of this land with respect to land values. Without wanting to be a real estate agent, you can't lose, because this land is not going to lose its value. If you may have some surplus land in future for reconfiguration for other purposes, the actual location is quite good. Now, the other thing, David Bennett, and I've quoted this MP for Hamilton East, he once said to me, when the blues are in, you go for the blue money. When the red-greens are in, you go for the red-green money. Well, that makes sense to me. Let me tell you about the red-green money. The Prime Minister herself made a public statement of full support for a significant rail transport infrastructure project between Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga. Massive campaigning by Sue Moroney and Dave McPherson and many others. The campaigning is over. The campaigning is now finished. The new government has clearly committed serious money and serious infrastructure to making this work and a success. If you want to go back to the visionary Mayor Dubmar Robinson in Auckland, do you remember when he wanted light rail and underground, and the silly, parochial, stupid little borough councils at the time, with their narrow-mindedness, ignored the great Robbie's solution, and now look at Auckland, the billions of dollars on retrofitting, because those stupid, narrow-minded borough fiefdoms didn't listen to Robbie at the time. Well, this is our Dubmar Robinson moment. And just future-proof. Look at Australia, similar settlement patterns, similar transport use. A city of 2 million. Within 10 to 15 years, Auckland has 2 million. Within 10 to 15, 20 years max, Greater Hamilton has 250,000 people. Look at Australia. Look at Ipswich, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Ballarat, Bendigo, Melbourne, Geelong, Sydney, Wollongong, Newcastle. What do you find there? They have commuter rail. They have serious rail. They are successes. Quite similar to New Zealand. So, folks, this is a time for vision, and I fully support this motion, and actually this is actually a very historic day if we approve this motion. Just making sure.
Councillor Leo.
No, I can't top that one, but I'll try. What I think we have to realise, of course, in 3 years' time, we're going to have a 4-lane highway from Cambridge out here right through into the Auckland motorway. The congestion point will be not until we are over the top of the Bombay Hills. My preferred option, of course, is to have the park and ride at Mercer. because a train with a 2'6" gauge track cannot actually compete with a 110k expressway. And I think what would happen then, of course, is that we will have people driving to Mercer, jumping on the train and then into Auckland. I fully agree with Gary that the train cannot deviate from its track. And once you get to that station at the end of it, that's as far as you can go. Going back to, I think it was 1998, when the existing service from Hamilton going right through to Auckland, I think it finished up with about 18 persons, and there was a huge subsidy which they had to pay, or somebody had to pay, just to keep that thing going. I'm going to support this motion because with the amount of growth which is going on out there in that industrial area, I don't think we'd have any problem at all flicking off that section, those 4 sections, and probably make quite a good profit out of it, because the amount of development which out there is fantastic. And how many people are going to be actually looking for work in Auckland when I see what's happening around Hamilton here? I very much doubt if we'll have many people on that train. But it's worthwhile purchasing the land at this point in time. And I think, Chris, you said that the overbridge which there was going to be funded through the base people, is that correct? Yeah, so that's not on us. But overall, what we're going to be looking at is just over $10,000 per car park, which to me seems to be a hell of a lot of money. And let's hope we can put a charge on that particular car park with no more free parking for 2 hours.
Okay, we're going to the board to vote. Can we clear the board, please?
Martin didn't quite persuade.
Can we clear the board? Okay, we're voting.
The motion is carried, 11 for, 1 against.
Okay, we're now going to this middle-sized folder that we've got, 3/3, open agenda. And we turn to page 3 to start. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Blair. We'll take the document as read.
Yes, we're happy to take the document as read, Your Worship, and happy to take questions. The only comment I would make is that the business case in front of you today represents the HIF application, which was incorporated in the Peacock's growth scenario that Council resolved to proceed with last night. So this was encapsulated and built into all the numbers in the conversation that we had last night, but certainly happy to take any detailed questions.
Okay, we don't have any questions, so we'll move to debate. Okay, Rob, we're debating. Fire away on a question.
Thank you. I mentioned yesterday that I had some questions when we got to this. Look, I don't want to repeat any questions that I asked yesterday because I know that we did morph into some of the questions around the business case. What I'd be keen to see, and I couldn't find it anywhere in here in one document, is perhaps a simple little profit and loss account and balance sheet for Peacock, which shows what the costs are going to be over the OPEX costs are going to be over the next 10 years, and what our balance sheet will look like at the end of 10 years versus how much we still owe on the HIF loan that we will have to consider refinancing into an interest-bearing loan. And I know it's not as easy to do as I'm making it sound, but it would be good from a decision-making point of view, just to know ahead, as well as we possibly can, ahead of time, what that balance sheet might look like in 10 years' time when there's a council who will be faced with the decision of refinancing that debt. And I know that there are, I know that there are lots of imponderables because surely it must revolve around the number of sections that get sold and the amount of DCs that we collect on each of those sections.
So, Councillor Rob, happy offline, separate to this, to produce more information if you want. As I said yesterday.
Well, I think the council, all of the other councillors, I don't think I'm the only one who might want that.
Okay, well,
I suspect that other councillors would like to see that because I think there's a legacy here and I don't want to leave an unknown legacy or perhaps one that we haven't previously considered to that council in 10 to 15 years' time who are faced with, you know, oh my goodness, what have they left us with? What did they consider at the time that they made this decision to go ahead with the HIF loan?
So I think...
So excuse me, the agenda's been out for 5 days. Why didn't you ask for this so that staff could actually put this together before we're about to make a decision?
Oh, come on, Mayor Andrew, I think you've got to be fair. I got this on Friday morning, 1,000 pages to read. I have been through most of it. I have put together questions. I have asked a number of questions of staff. But to be honestly and fair, we have been pretty busy over the last 5 days. We've not known over the last 2 days how all of this process was going to come together in meetings.
You've just asked for a huge amount of work to be done.
Well, I
you
hadn't
started off
seen
saying
this
it was simple and then you went on to say it wasn't so simple. It's a big job and to give staff a chance to get started on this before the meeting.
Okay, well, okay. If that's your response to my request,
Could I offer a suggestion? Maybe, obviously, staff can't get that done for this meeting. This is still going out to public consultation, so somewhere on the line, I think it possibly would be worthwhile for people to see that. But I think we just got to acknowledge that it won't get done today.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Rob?
I mean, look, I don't want to make a decision on this loan until I have had my eyes as wide open as they possibly can, particularly around the financial aspects to it. And it is a biggie. It's as big as on its own, to me, this is as big as the long-term plan because this is the biggest investment the city has made in a growth cell. It involves millions of dollars. There are significant risks around it because of the high cost of opening it up. And there is a huge legacy here that if we don't do this right, then we have the legacy now that we've got on some of the things that were done 10, 12 years ago around this council that we're still grappling with.
So I think...
Excuse me, we've known about the HIF and the layout of the HIF and the structure of the HIF now for nearly a year. And this question was able to be asked any time since the structure of the HIF was first offered to us. If we're here now to make a decision and you're asking for a report to be done that can't be delivered. Nothing's changed from when this HIF was first offered to us on this type of...
I disagree with that, Mayor Andrew. I think that a lot of work will have been done in terms of discussions with developers, with government, in terms of the repayment of the HIF, and I know that there have been changes over this period of time in terms of how we are going to repay that loan. It was originally a loan for 10 years, but it's now a loan for 10 years after drawdown. That's one example, but there will well have been other discussions with third parties that will be quite different to what we knew at the beginning when the HIF loan was offered. And I think the government will have changed its view, or the central government, MB have probably changed their approach as this journey has continued through this application.
It just appears to me you've come into this meeting to ask for something that can't be delivered when we're on the day of making a decision. I'll pass back to Blair.
Yeah, so I think the question there was just in regards to the financials of the business case and how that looks in terms of our wider financials. What I would say is a few comments. First and foremost, we've taken an overall approach to the growth in terms of assessing growth and how we look at that in terms of the financials of council, and that was the comprehensive report that was considered yesterday, which looked at our entire growth expenditure across the city, of which the Peacock HIF application is a part of that. So we've looked at the entire effect of growth, development contributions, impact on debt to revenue of all that growth expenditure. And the HIF is an interest-free loan as part of that. Notwithstanding that, Councillor Rob, in terms of your question, we're at stage 3 of a 5-stage process, today being the seeking council to approve the business case for that then to be formally considered by MB and NZTA in terms of whether the Minister then supports the business case. Stage 4 is public consultation through the 10-year plan process. Stage 5 is following public consultation, council finally agreeing to the HIF loan process and then agreeing to sign up funding agreements. So there are a number of steps to occur. The other element to this is that if we do proceed with the HIF loan, there'll be a detailed reporting schedule for both MB, government and also council, which would capture a number of the things that you're raising in terms of the financial performance of the HIF, the yield, the houses, the development contributions, which speaks to the information you're seeking. So 3 elements there, and certainly to Councillor Mallett's comment, we would certainly be happy to provide further information to a subsequent meeting to outline that sort of balance sheet P&L performance of the specific HIF application.
Okay.
And can I also just add that there is a nature of complexity, and it's a comment I made at the briefing about it's all about debt a couple of months ago, and the complexity is that at any particular point in time, any growth cell, every subdivision or suburb in Hamilton City, and this goes for any city around the world pretty much, is paying for the growth of the next one. There's never a situation where a growth cell will theoretically wash its face, and it's just the sheer nature of the way cities work, and it's maybe over a 100-year cycle they'll cover the costs, but it's intergenerational nature. And I've said before that Rotorua was leveraged off the back of equity that was created off the rates that were provided from Hillcrest and so forth. So whatever we do, we'll have a degree of assumptions attached to it to drive it down to as simple mathematical equation as possible. And it might well be that, Councillor, it doesn't actually satisfy your concerns because some of those assumptions may well be robust, unless we drag it out over a 40-year period, may not necessarily reflect the actual balance sheet return you're looking for. It's just the way that nature of these things work, if you understand that.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with that, but we are being asked questions out there in the community at the moment about how much of our rates are paying for growth. And I think that we need to give our residents an answer to that. And whether they agree with it or not is not the point. I think, when we're facing a significant increase in rates, which is what is being promoted in this long-term plan, and we're also promoting some significant growth at this city, some growth cells that this city has not seen for a number of years, I think we need to somehow get a degree of reconciliation there so that the residents know exactly how much of it is for growth and how much of it is for running an operation of the city. And can I just dovetail into that, the point that was raised yesterday, which was relatively new to me, but obviously it is a factor around the payment of what's paying for rates and what's paying for growth, and that is that there was a suggestion yesterday that some revenue costs involved in the development of the HIF loan and the planning around Peacock would eventually be capitalised to the project. Now, I don't know whether that was meant, in terms of my understanding, to be that it would be capitalised to the capital account in our financial statements, or whether it was being capitalised to the development contributions account so that DCs were collected. But it was clear in my mind from what was said, and I think you may have said it, Richard, that we were actually looking at taking some staff time. I think it was when Councillor Mallett raised the additional staff time and the additional personnel cost, that some of that was related to growth, which would end up being capitalised there.
On a work backwards, so clarifying that point, Councillor Rob, is any costs associated with design or otherwise of a solution can be capitalised. So, so that's
staff time too?
Yep, that's staff time too, so that can be capitalised. It cannot be we've got to be careful whether we capitalise it for development contributions, but it will be available for NZ2I subsidy if it's transport related. So we're very clear on that. In terms of now I understand your intent of your question. Thank you for explaining. I can tell you now that 15.5% rates increase is required to cover the cost of running the city. You, at that point, could choose not to do any capital. You could basically, at that point, turn off the city. We would balance our books. We don't. So that's the balance in the books numbers, 15.5%. A 12% rates increase will let us do our current capital program that's currently included, what we're referring to as the initial budget. That's in this book, the Mayor's budget, a 12% rates increase. If you made a decision to not do any of the community infrastructure and you made a decision that you're comfortable with running at a deficit, you could get away with a 5.7% increase. So when you come and start having these conversations, we can tell you what portion of the rates increase is providing leverage to fund debt. We don't need to do a detailed calculation to determine that. We've got the information now by backing out aspects of the capital program to tell you really what the portion of the increase is that has been leveraged for debt. But the question is, there's two things. Rates increase over here cover the cost of the cost we've incurred, so it's the growth of Rototuna. There's an article in the paper that said the Rototuna rates are going up to pay for peacocks. That was completely incorrect. The rates are going up to pay for the cost of stretching the city over, which includes Rototuna. So it's finally an opportunity for Rototuna to meet their costs, right? Then we can make a decision, a completely separate decision, and we can put a halt. We can make a decision to run all our assets down. We make a decision not to fund growth. I know it's ludicrous. I'm not suggesting this, by the way. Make sure the media aren't quoting me. And no community assets, no renewals, no growth. We'd still need 15.5% rates increase. Then we've got a whole lot of debt capacity created by that 15.5%. We can choose to spend that entire debt capacity, more than what we've currently got in there, to do anything we like. We've made a choice yesterday. We're going to fund some, and today, some transport infrastructure, some growth infrastructure. There's the other, there's renewals and so forth, so that's a portion of that. But we could have made a decision to spend that debt capacity on anything else. So you've got to separate the rates increase for previous growth and then the rates increase for capital programs which can improve growth. So we can give you those numbers now. And that's part of the conversation we can have when we get into the back end of the 10-year plan, when we're wrapping all these up with the various changes. We can start modelling different things. I can ask Brett to back everything out that we haven't approved, and it'll tell you that you still need whatever the outcome is from an operating point of view, assume nothing changes, 15.5% rates increase to cover your costs of your city. That debt leverage, if you don't do a whole lot of other stuff, we only really need X amount if we want a debt leverage. So council has that decision to play as well. So I can give you that answer now. We don't need to do a detailed modelling to determine that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I would still like to see this information. I mean, I don't necessarily want it for the purposes of this decision, but given that we're at stage 3, I think by the time we get to stage 5, then I think we need to make sure that
we'll bring it at a later stage.
That we know exactly where Peacock might sit in 10 years and in 15 years, which I think is the timing for the repayment. Is that range of time between 10 and 15 when we will have to repay the drawdowns on the HIF loan and replace it with interest-bearing loans, if indeed there is any money outstanding, if there is any portion of the loan that's still outstanding at that particular time.
Could I just add to this? Sorry, I'm not trying to defeat. You try not to defeat the request. We'll do that, but won't for today. So we can't do that for today, right?
Understand.
And my view is we don't need it for a decision today either, because for two reasons. I don't think it's relevant specifically because we can give the answers at a gross level, but secondly, Blair's absolutely correct. What you need to be aware of, though, is that we run our balance sheet and our P&L in a way that reflects all the impact of these decisions. So our decision to invest in Peacock or any other growth cell, as Blair has pointed out, is captured in our modelling. So there's a risk that if we go down and start looking at an individual growth cell, it then starts undermining our mass balance sheet approach and starts eroding investments in other parts. For example, we start allocating costs across here and costs back there. It may mean we have to put less in the community and so forth. It's just the nature of what we're doing. And it completely changes our paradigm for the way we run the balance sheet. But we'll do that, but it will be for when we have that information for council.
It'll be in the February meeting cycle. Cool. So if I can just make a comment on the document in front of you. This business case is the most robust piece of growth analysis this council has done in terms of in my time here. and not only the financial analysis, which Councillor Rob is asking us about, but across all elements of assessing the Peacock's proposition in terms of the business case. So what's in front of you here looks at the proposition for Peacocks from a strategic lens, a financial lens, a management lens, a commercial lens, and an economic lens. So it's a thorough piece of work. We had a comprehensive mix of people on the team from both internal and external consultants. The work was peer reviewed both from a technical engineering perspective, an economic perspective and an overall perspective. So this has been through a very robust process. So more than happy to supply the information Councillor Rob's asking for, because we've done the work. It is there. It's just not available in the form that will answer the specific question today. But certainly you want to give you the confidence that the thinking and the correlation and the logic here is very robust.
Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Just hopefully a straightforward question, because you did partly answer it before. There's a series of decisions to go through yet, and the public gets to consult on this. If we approve this staff recommendation as it is, what money gets spent ahead of the LTP deciding, if any, or how does this, do you get what I mean? How does this timing fit with the timing of the decision we made yesterday?
So in the report, Councillor Paul, I do touch on that in section 108 and 109 of the report. So if I go back to the purposes of the HIF, the HIF was about the government working in partnership with councils to deliver houses faster. That was the entire main driver of HIF, conscious that we need to get more houses to the market.
Mm-hmm.
The government also recognised that funding of infrastructure for councils was a challenge, so that was the HIF loan. We clearly can't commit to any HIF agreement or loans until we've completed the long-term plan, which is from July next year. Council, as I've described in paragraphs 108 and 109, could elect to spend some money in the current financial year to advance some of the work to get things moving on the ground. So when we get to July, we haven't sort of lost 4 to 5 months next year. And that would be work such as early design work on the water and wastewater and roading projects, early work to lay the foundations for acquiring the land that we require within the Peacocks area for the infrastructure. It's not necessarily buying the land, it's not necessarily doing the detailed design, but it's getting all the work underway to make that happen. We have had agreement from MB that if we were to expend any money on that work, and it was work that was identified in the HIF business case, that if council signed up to the HIF agreement in July, we could retrospectively capture that work within the HIF arrangement. So that's a decision for council, and I propose to bring a report back to council in February on those potential candidate projects for council to make a decision as to where they want us to go.
At the moment, we don't have a quantum around that, because that's at risk money. Well, it's sort of at risk.
Well, I think it's only at risk to the extent that council at some point has to invest in the Peacock cell. So anything that you would be doing in that work would be required. Mm-hmm. We have a designation already for the Southern Links transport network. So if you were to start the process of accelerating land acquisition, we need to buy the land anyway. And in fact, we have budget to acquire land in the long-term plan, not necessarily this year. So the current long-term plan has money set aside. So we will bring back those options for council, but we're not talking tens of millions of dollars here, Councillor Paula. We simply can't spend that amount of money in 4 months. But it's a case of trying to do some work in this financial year to speed things up, so when we get to July, we're underway.
Okay, I just wondered roughly what quantum that was, but you
I can't tell you the amount.
Can't tell me. Okay, just one other thing in terms of the staff recommended.
Sorry, Chris might be able to. Chris or Andrew might be able to offer a comment, but
No.
Paula, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
If council elected to start some of the processes next year, the reality, as Blair says, you couldn't spend a lot, but you could do quite a lot in terms of getting ready. So you could establish contracts with designers and things like that. So the costs would be there, but in the scheme of HIF, it could be low hundreds of thousands at best. I think the one item that would use a lot of money would be any actual land acquisition. And there could some land acquisition, but again, I think the initial piece of work would to be to establish the team and get systems in place for land acquisition. There might be one or two very critical projects, but we would bring all of those to council for decisions.
Thank you. I understand that now. That answers my question very well. Just in terms of that then, Richard, that money, if we were to spend those low hundreds of thousands this year, you can do that without dropping something off this year?
Yes.
Thank you. Just in terms of the staff recommendation G, where we're talking about advocating to the government, I've spoken quite strongly on this in the past in our workshops and what have you. Can we not flesh that out a little bit to include some of the funding tools? Because I'm really interested in waving a flag over the extension of the loan period and some of those other infrastructure bond ideas that you have shared with us, but that is very vague. That means we're just going to go and have a little talk to them about potentially some tools. I'd like to be more specific. Could it happen? In that
actually, that's not vague. That's broad because we've got a number of irons in the fire. We're having lots of conversations. Basically, Blair, when he finishes work at 5, spends the next 5 hours working on this as his hobby. So I would like to keep it as broad as possible without limiting it. You can guarantee that we are having the conversations. I prefer to approach it that way. Extending the loan, special purpose vehicles, private-public partnerships, infrastructure bonds, the whole gambit is fuel tax, sorry? Absolutely, Councillor Mallett.
But I could make an amendment, depending on what was moved, saying inclusive of, but not, including, but not restricted to, and put up a. I'm not saying I'm going to, but that is possible.
You could do. I just believe that you can have faith in that we'll have those conversations. I don't think it needs a formal resolution, but that's fine. It is your option to do that.
I think I'd also just remind Council on the other paper, the growth paper yesterday, we actually outlined a range of areas that we're exploring with the government. So as Richard said, we're already doing it. And in fact, Kelvin's in Wellington today advocating on some of these matters as we speak.
With all due respect, we don't always know what the tenure of conversations that's going on in Wellington is. But anyway, in respect to that, that's the end of my questions. Thank you. Oh, and I will just note, though, that I've heard Rob ask for that information at least 4 times in the recent months.
No, who's talking about it?
I'm just, on behalf of the staff, they just looked a bit shocked by that statement. Because staff, obviously the message hasn't got through to the key staff who are working on that, so I think it's a pretty broad sweeping statement. Okay, we'll move the motion and we'll go to debates. Mark.
So moved and seconded by the Deputy Mayor.
Seconded by the Deputy Mayor.
Just very briefly, I'll pretty much repeat what I said yesterday. I understand what you're doing. Fantastic work. Thank you very much. And I really don't want to diminish any of the work you've done. I appreciate it's a great deal. I also understand it's not about rates. It's about debt capacity. I understand that. The issue we have with both Peacocks and Rotokauri is that they take us up to that capacity really quickly. And that's the difficulty we sit at the moment, which is because of that jolly bridge, that jolly 100 million plus bridge. But the question in my mind is, do we want to be a suburb or a city? It's not a gradual jump into massive debt with these projects. I get that. It immediately puts ratepayers at risk and limits their options down the track. However, I understand we've got growth to cope with. Look, I will vote for it to stay in the dance, but I'm giving you notice that I have called an Uber. And unless the band starts playing a slightly better song, I'm going to back up and go home. So, thank you.
Really, I like the ringing of that bell. It worked. I wound it up.
Wow. I was stopping anyway, actually.
Play it again, John. Angela.
Mayor Andrew, look, I didn't support the capital project budget yesterday, and a significant chunk of that is for Peacock. As I raised through some of my questions yesterday, some of the rates rise is to go to support the, growth, and I pointed out the 41 new staff positions, of which 15 are in the growth department. Look, this budget, again, how I spoke yesterday, is about priorities, and the Mayor has been consistent on that. His priority is growth, my priority is community. Councillor Mallett, through his debate, disagreed with me, raising my priority as being the people, and he said, appropriately enough, that houses possibly are more important. He didn't say houses are more important than people, but that we need houses, and we do. But this is public money that we are spending, and the constituents that are talking to me are really concerned about the lack of investment and commitment towards community spending. As I also reflected yesterday, I'm not convinced that the growth that we have had and that's been reported is unprecedented. Unprecedented is a word that we're building this massive commitment on, and I think we've got that one wrong. The latest November business survey from Westpac that I alluded to yesterday, they are surprised that that has shown that New Zealand business confidence has plunged, and that concerns me. They said in that survey that it shows this activity hasn't dropped to the levels since 2009, when we were towards the end of the GFC. That concerns me. The landscape has changed. I am really concerned that we will leave a legacy that is a great white elephant. So for me, I cannot support this.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I am going to support the staff recommendation with because it's consistent with the decision I made yesterday, and I fundamentally support the opportunity of the public to comment on this matter. I have raised some concerns. I do think we need to work harder in Wellington to make them understand the impact of growth on the ability of councils to implement their other business. And both Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Bunting are completely correct when they describe the community spend as the poor relation to growth. It is. And I was hoping to see from some of those graphs, and I just tried to look in my big box of handouts, that with growth, in a few years' time, with more houses and more ratepayers, that we'd start to see ourselves being able to deliver some of the wonderful visionary plans for the community for all to enjoy. But that didn't happen. Growth funds growth for a very long time because we are so financially constrained. So we're all going to have an interesting afternoon fighting over which community assets and facilities and which plans and whose trumps whose. People have got their wish lists there. And that's unfortunate in my view, because we are all trying to create not just a bigger city, and I know it sounds like rhetoric because I used it a lot in my pre-election campaign as well, not just a bigger city, but actually a better city. And so that's why I've asked a lot of questions, and I'll be watching with interest as this rolls out about the quality of amenity and service in that area, and not leaving Rototuna behind, but also not letting some of our older subdivisions decline even further. People who've lived in the city, Hamilton East, Norton, areas like that that are much older, they deserve to have something spent on them as well to make this the part of the city, the community that they live in, vibrant and healthy. So, yeah, look, I believe fully in public consultation. Imagine we'll get some people who are very supportive of this and others who've got some fresh ideas, and I'd like to hear those. I'm glad to hear that not too much money is being spent up front, because I think you can spend by stealth. We do really want to put this out. So let's put this out, let's see what people think about it, see if we're touching the mark. My biggest concern lies with the community spend. We'll be discussing that this afternoon.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Angela raised the issue about whether it's unprecedented growth or not. That's a little bit irrelevant. The fact is that whether the growth's unprecedented or not, it is growth, and it's growth that we have to try and accommodate. We know that we've been short of sections. We know that one of the issues with regard to that is zoning of property, of land, and the ability of us to provide infrastructure. This is one way of providing that infrastructure, that infrastructured up land, which will go some way towards mitigating the growth that we have, and Dave has even raised concerns that perhaps we're not providing for enough growth, that the Nydia stuff's wrong, or anyway. So the issue is not so much whether it's unprecedented or not. Those are just throwaway words, to be honest. The reality is that we are struggling to keep up with growth. This is creating stress in our housing market. The way the housing market responds is by shooting up the price of houses, which leaves more and more families struggling to get into the housing market. This is one way for us to try and mitigate that issue, and I think it's one of the most fundamental obligations of any local authority, that the law says that, and also morally it says that. I think morally this is one of the most fundamental obligations we have, is to make sure that we are providing adequate core infrastructure to provide for houses and jobs for our community.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, I first of all want to compliment the Mayor and the Chair and Deputy of the Growth and Infrastructure and Chief Executive and the staff team for the massive amount of work that you've been doing with the previous government, the current government and officials. Yes, in anything you do and any decisions you make, be it in business or local government or central government, there's always a calculated risk. And so you have a calculated risk of moving ahead and joining with central government in terms of the interest-free loan and developing the peacocks. To what degree is that different from many years ago? In a previous life, I remember the Hamilton Urban Growth Strategy and the growth of Flagstaff, Rototuna. Now, to what degree is this different? Now, let's imagine a council all those years ago who said no to Rototuna, no to Flagstaff. And I'm going to challenge in this council for those people who are sceptics of this, and I respect their democratic right, but I want to hear your alternative. What is your vision? So if you don't have the Peacock's growth cell, what is your vision? What is your alternative? And as I understand it, the international economy, the local economy goes up and down. That is a circular motion. A comment was made about the Business Confidence Survey Index. What's interesting is individual business people apparently are very confident about their own business. And I suspect that confidence, and I remember this in the previous Labour-led government, because certain members of the business community, with respect, now have a government that doesn't reflect their individual view, that sometimes tends to colour their thinking, and there's a huge danger that you talk yourself into recession. Economies go up and down, as they did since we developed Rototuna and Flagstaff. But this time, ironically, well, not ironic, I agree with Councillor Gary. And in the end, what is the best way in which we help young couples, young people realise the Kiwi dream? And actually, with this fairness to the Mayor, community spend, well, there's a $20 million proposal for Rototuna for a community centre. There's a regional theatre proposal. There's parks. There's adventure playgrounds. There's Hamilton Gardens. I think that comes under community, under this Mayor. Under this Mayor. I'm sort of a little bit confused in terms of that. So, without further ado, I recognise the risks. I recognise the challenges. Obviously, I'll say to the Chief Executive and to the Mayor and to Councillor McPherson and Taylor, keep talking to the government and officials to get the best deal we can, but at least I believe we're on our way. And I ask councillors to close your eyes and think, what happens if you do not develop peacocks? What happens? And then historically reflect what would have happened if a previous council said no to Rototuna, no to Flagstaff.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I support submitting this non-binding application to the HIF, which represents a massive amount of work and expertise from our staff. Fantastic work that they've put into this. Look, providing housing is our core business. It is. This is what we should be doing. of all the tasks that the council has, providing infrastructure for new housing is one of the most important. In the last couple of decades, we've had a pretty easy ride. You've had Flagstaff and Rototuna opened up, and not a lot for councils to worry about. But now we're back to the hard part. It was time to break open a new growth cell. Never going to be easy. It's easy for people to attack it and say, look, other parts of the budget are missing out. This was always going to be painful. And you can't say that we're not looking at other options. We've looked at every option. As Councillor McPherson said yesterday, infills travelling at more than 50%. We've got the other areas, Rototuna, we've still got there, Ruakura, Rotokauri, we've got the other options. It's not that we haven't looked at these. And there's no cheaper option. You've been told that repeatedly. Once you factor in the interest-free loans, Rotokauri isn't cheaper. Staff have told us this. And even if we do Rotokauri, you're still going to have to break open another cell within 10 years anyway. So it's the same with all the other options to the north or the east. And the SHAs, they're not going to come riding to the rescue on their own either. We need more than that. So you can't pretend that there's better options on the table, because there aren't. I agree it's not perfect. I agree I feel a little let down by the government in terms of this. The government's pushing hard for the extra housing, and it hasn't made life easy for us in terms of our debt levels. But the game's not over yet, and Councillor Bunting's right. We've got to stay in the dance, and I'm certainly doing that very happily, actually, because this is the only option on the table as far as I'm concerned. So well done, staff, and I support this.
Councillor Jones.
First off, I think a huge amount of thanks has to go to Mayor Andrew, CEO Richard and HCC staff for putting this HIF together, and the massive amount, like Jeff said, the massive amount of work that's gone into this HIF application and negotiations with the government. Yesterday I voted against the Peacock growth cell, and I had my reasons for that. I still believe that if things don't go right and Peacock does not realise its expectations at the end, I'll repeat it again, our golden goose could turn into our rhyme of the ancient mariner and be a albatross around every ratepayer's neck. However, this HIF application or submission we're putting in is a risk, but it is non-binding as well. So I'm looking forward to what the new government that Deputy Mayor Gallagher so gallantly displays and yeah, okay, to us all. I'm looking to see what else we can get out of them, either a longer term or whatever else, or better negotiations with them. So for that reason, I'll be voting for the HIF, but like other people said, that could change at the end.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. Look, it's been said before, but cities have to provide places for people to live. We're already doing going way above the odds in infill, and as Jeff has mentioned, the Rotokauri growth cell, which is the alternative growth cell, is not going to cut the mustard in terms of providing the number of spaces we need for even the low visions of expected growth over the next 10 years. We cannot stop accepting growth. If we tried to do that, all that would happen would be the prices of the small amounts of land, property available would skyrocket. We'd make it a lot worse in terms of affordability, in terms of access for people, and I don't think the businesses here in Hamilton would thank us for that. Angela, I believe when you were talking about the size of staff or the growth in staff numbers proposed in council, you need to look a little bit more historically. In my time on council, I know that we've had a budget and population increases of about 70 to 80%, but we've only had staffing increases of about 15 to 20%. I think we do quite a good job by the lights of any council, in keeping efficient in that area as well. The business confidence in terms of surveys taken straight after elections may show a bit of a dip. But if you looked at the sale of business land around the city, industrial land around the city, commercial land, it doesn't look like the businesses are lacking confidence at all, perhaps the opposite. Paul is right. The impact of growth needs to be better known in Wellington. I don't think they have a great appreciation. They do tend to chuck a few bucks at the problem and think that that's going to sort it all out for you. And clearly it's a hell of a lot more complicated than that, and we need to appraise them of that sort of situation. And the financial situation it puts us in, the affordability of other facilities and amenities that it puts us in, that is a problem. We can't just gratefully accept what they say without actually putting to them that they're putting us in a bit of a quandary as well. But above all else, this is our best opportunity to open up an area of the city that we've long wanted to morally, but not been able to financially or physically open up. We're not going to get this sort of opportunity again in a hurry without paying a whole lot more for it. So I suggest we do take it. Probably the last thing I'd say would be to Councillor Bunty as he waits for the Uber at the dance door because he's about to take off there. There's another door that's open with a really hot gender-neutral partner waiting to invite you in a different direction.
No comment from you, Councillor Mark. Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, it takes a lot of courage to stand up for your beliefs and and what I've heard from our mayor right from the start when he was standing for the mayoralty, he talked about peacocks, peacocks and peacocks. And for a long time I just thought, well, I actually don't want to hear that ever again. But I changed my view, and I'm looking forward to the public's view as well, and that's really important to me. But after listening to the staff, and I know you've done a horrendous amount of work on this, and it does take a lot of work, I can see that now I'm more and more convinced that we do need peacocks. And one of the things that really may open up my eyes was what Councillor Taylor said, was it is so close to our city. And it is really only over the bridge, and we're in the city. So we are trying to encourage the city to be more vibrant. And so if the closer we have got people, the more vibrancy will come into the city as well. So I'm excited about that. And what I'm also excited about, and hopefully we can work more on this when we open up peacocks, that we will make it cycle-friendly, we will make it for people to community is not about building, not only about building community hubs and swimming pools and all these wonderful things that we do need, and I totally agree with Councillor Ange about that. Totally, we need that. But it is also about bike trails. It's about things that connect us, and not in cars, but where we are open, we get to talk to each other and see each other. And so that's really important. I just want to quote something that in the public forum yesterday, and I don't know whether many people got that, what Diana Wood said yesterday. She said, I can't wait till our 2-meter high fences rot away and I'm able to see my neighbours and be able to talk to my neighbours properly. So I just would love to make it a suggestion that we maybe convey to our developers not to build 2-meter high fences. So actually people talk to each other. The community is actually people. And if we shut them off and shut them away because it's actually the developer's problem as well, or they have built the wrong houses for us for so many years, and I'm digging in there for hard out, because they've told us how we should live. Maybe we can tell them how we want to live and how we want to deal with our neighbours and how we want to build that community in these new suburbs. And so maybe we have a chance there to say, look, build it so we actually create a community, because in every street, you can either build a house so you meet your neighbor, or you can build a house you never see your neighbor. So we can maybe challenge them to come to the party and build the right houses so we can live as a community. And I do want the swimming pools and all the other things too, of course. But it is about people, bringing people together, and they will enjoy living in Peacocks, because it's actually a beautiful suburb. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robb.
Thank you, Chair. Look, paragraph 26 suggests at the moment we have 4 years of greenfield capacity. And then paragraph 26 then further suggests that we need to move to 7 years development capacity. And I suspect that this is what it will be a primary motivator with Peacock. The question is when and at what cost. I accept the comments made around this table that one of the primary reasons why local government exists is to provide the infrastructure so that people can come and live in the city. And I don't deny that. But I think it is also our role to ask questions and to continue to ask the right questions as a development such as this, which is a significantly large development with significant ratepayer financial risk, that I think we continue to ask questions to make sure that through the whole process of this journey, we are getting answers to questions that are relevant and appropriate as the development progresses. So I make no apology for the fact that for the questions that I have asked today and for questions that I will continue to ask as this project continues to develop. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say a few words. Thank you, Blair. I know you've put a huge amount into this. Your heart and soul's gone into this for a long time. So just particularly thank you. You've led this. Thank you, Luke and Calvin, who's not here today. I know you've got right in behind us and also put a lot in and supported this process. Andrew Parsons and Chris Allen and others and your teams who have all just put so much into this. And I just want to personally thank you. I just want to remind you of how this process started.
And Karen Saunders.
Karen, thank you, Karen. I just want to remind you of how this all started. So the Productivity Commission on Urban Development asked for submissions, and this council put a submission in, and the submission was exactly what came back. And we said in their submission, which came from this table, but from the last council, that the central government should make large amounts of money available to open up new growth cells, interest-free for 10 years. And that was the beginning of what happened. Shortly after that, they came back, the national government came back, and they offered the HIF. And then our team fought very hard to get well more than what was our percentage out of the growth councils for that, hundreds of millions of dollars. And against the odds and against what some people outside of this council suggested we should get. Since then, the Labour government, we've talked to the new government and they've said that they're going to honour and stand by that agreement. That was another big moment. Then the team tried to get it together in one night in the middle of winter in the dark upstairs in Richard's office. This basically pretty well the whole senior management team were there, and they sat me down as the mayor and I just said, look, they're really struggling here to make it all work. And it went around the table and I had to make a call. And I said, no, we're going to continue with this. I just think, just go away, keep working on it. And everyone walked out of that room, totally different spirit than what they were when they walked in. And everyone got right in behind it. Everybody worked really hard and put this together and came back with the model that we're looking at today. And I want to thank that team that were there that night. That was a pivotal moment when it really ignited you and you really walked out of that room. And I remember the spirit in everybody when they walked out of that room of how keen they were, how enthusiastic they were, and how they really got in behind us and just made it work. And I just want to thank you for that. This is a business model that works. This pays its own way. This isn't some kind of guessing game. This is an actual model as a business works. that's going to pay its way and pay itself back and pay itself off with the income that's going to come in from it. And it's also something that's expected of central government, that we do actually make sections available and a surplus of sections available. And it also delivers a promise that nearly 30 years of talk around this table in this room by previous councils of opening this area up, and then at the 11th hour being diverted off again into a different area, in a different growth cell. And I think this council, when we're old councillors in our rocking chairs and retired, will look back and we'll smile to ourselves in our hearts about what we achieved during this process for the city. Okay, let's go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried 11 for, 1 against.
Okay, we'll stop for lunch until quarter to 2. Quarter to 2 back here. Yep. Thank you.
Stephen to do